Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another video about terrifying true crimes that happened on Halloween. We decided that since there were so many stories to choose from, we wanted to do as many as possible. It only seemed right at a time of year when we're all looking to be a little terrified. If you haven't seen the first 3 cases we covered, be sure to check those out as well. We'll leave a link in the description below. As always, if you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. With that out of the way, here are 3 more chilling Halloween true crime stories. On November 2nd, 1988, residents of Lancaster, California began receiving bizarre, threatening letters from an unknown source. The letters were typed and printed out, stapled together, and each was stamped with the word confidential. When the recipients of the letters opened and read them, they were shocked at the messages inside. The unknown senders threatened to kill them and members of their families if they did not send large amounts of money to various local addresses. Disturbingly, all of the letters included the following warning: the police cannot protect you every minute of the day, month, and year. If you decide not to pay, we'll blow your brains out. Even more chilling than the threats themselves was the fact that the senders seemed to have intimate knowledge of the details of many of their victims' lives. One such victim was a woman named Eileen Maluccio, who received a letter informing her that there was a contract out on her life. The letter disturbingly went on to mention her late husband, who had died from a heart attack. The senders claimed that Eileen's husband had not actually died from a heart attack, but instead had been poisoned, and that the same would happen to her if she didn't pay up. The senders threatened to put toxic chemicals in her toothpaste, release mustard gas in her house, and kill her children. Eileen was instructed to send $300,000 in denominations of 10s and 20s to 5 local addresses, or the unknown senders would deliver on their threats. They claimed to be part of an organization of 2,000 people. In all, at least 263 people in Lancaster came forward claiming that they had received the threatening letters. They were all postmarked from Mojave, a town about 25 miles outside of Lancaster. But unfortunately, this information did not help to uncover the identities of the mysterious senders. Because of the date they were postmarked, police came to the conclusion that they were almost certainly sent on Halloween, leading them to initially theorize that the letters could have been a hoax. Still, many victims were beginning to send the extorted money out of fear for their lives, and police took the threat seriously. Soon, multiple detectives and volunteers were working on the case. As police began to analyze the letters, they created a flowchart of where each victim's money was supposed to be sent. They quickly realized that the entire thing had been set up as a kind of chain letter pyramid scheme, with victims instructed to send money to certain addresses, and then those victims instructed to send money to other addresses, and so on and so on. Eventually, some of the money would be sent back to the first person on the list, a constant, complex loop of money changing hands. Some of the letter recipients were instructed to buy 2-way radios and to drive out to Las Vegas with the demanded cash once a week until contact was made, but the mystery letter writers never got in touch. By the end of November, the baffling story had made national news and was picked up by the show Unsolved Mysteries. The segment profiled many of the bizarre aspects of the case, speculating as to whether this was a genuine attempt at extortion or some kind of sick hoax. Thankfully, as a result of the attention created by the broadcast, authorities were led to 2 suspects, 27-year-old Roman McCooch and 26-year-old Richard Ferroni. The men were former aerospace technicians who were skilled with computers and who reportedly had access to records containing the personal details of many Lancaster residents. It turned out that they had lived in Lancaster until a week before the letters were mailed. Furthermore, writing samples taken from McCooch revealed that he wrote in a similar style and made similar spelling and grammatical errors to those found in the letters. McCooch and Ferroni were arrested in Las Vegas and in December of that year extradited back to California. In January of 1990, they were convicted of extortion and other charges related to the Lancaster letters, and sentenced to 4 years in prison. Bizarrely, though investigators assumed that the two men were taking a cut of the money being sent all over Lancaster, no evidence was reportedly ever uncovered suggesting that either of them had actually collected any of the money. Because the men moved to Las Vegas before the letters actually went out, many continue to speculate that there were others involved in the scheme, though none have ever been identified. As for the motive behind the bizarre crime, as far as we can tell, neither McCooch or Ferroni ever provided one. Perhaps it was simply a cruel hoax. Or just maybe the men did succeed in stealing some of the money, and somehow never managed to be detected by police. While the idea of the killer masked maniac has long been a staple of Hollywood slasher movies, few of us dare to imagine that such evil crimes could ever happen in real life. Sadly, this is just what took place in the suburbs of San Jose, California, on Halloween night of 1984, when a 31-year-old woman named Doreen Erbert found herself in the middle of a real-life horror movie. Doreen was born Doreen Ray Hitchens to a loving and close-knit family in Santa Clara in 1952. Always one to care for others, her giving personality steered her towards a career in medicine, and eventually a job as a physical therapist. It was here that Doreen would meet her first husband, William Mike Dennis, in 1975. A sprayer at the nearby Lockheed Aerospace manufacturing plant, Mike was the polar opposite of Doreen. Instead of outgoing and confident, Mike was quiet and not very social. He suffered from significant hearing loss as a child, which had caused him to stutter, and this had taken a great toll on his ability to meet and talk to people. He especially had trouble meeting women, so when Doreen came along, his life was instantly changed for the better. After only a few months of dating, Mike and Doreen got married, and in 1976, they welcomed a son named Paul into the world. Though both Mike and Doreen were devoted parents, the added stress of parenthood on top of their marriage and other responsibilities soon proved too much for them to handle, and in 1977, they divorced. Mike took the divorce much harder than Doreen, who was quickly able to move on and marry a man named Charles Erbert. Charles owned his own home and carpet business, stability that Mike had never been able to provide. Though Mike was still allowed to see his son every weekend, these weekly visits also served to reinforce what he was missing out on. Doreen and Charles were a happy family, and soon they had their own child together named Deanna. Things only got worse when in 1980, 4-year-old Paul tragically died while under Doreen's supervision. He had been playing in the backyard and had fallen in the pool, and by the time Doreen noticed, it was already too late. Mike blamed Doreen and Charles for his son's death and took them to court after filing a wrongful death suit. But in 1982, the jury ruled in favor of the Erberts. After this, Mike's life began to completely unravel. He lost his position at the Lockheed factory and remained heartbroken over the loss of his son, as well as more bitter than ever about his divorce. However, it was when he learned that Doreen was pregnant with another child sometime in 1984 that he finally snapped, and decided to take out his anger in a truly horrific and evil way. Halloween night at the Erbert house that year started out completely normal. Because Doreen was 8 months pregnant, Charles took Deanna out trick-or-treating, while she stayed home to hand out candy. When they returned, Charles told Doreen that he had saved a few houses for her and Deanna, which they planned to do as soon as he made a quick trip out to the liquor store. Though Charles was gone for just 15 minutes, it turned out to be a fateful decision. At some point during that small window of time, Mike showed up at the door and knocked. He was dressed in a wolf mask and carrying an 18-inch machete. As soon as Doreen answered the door, horror set in. As Mike told her that he was going to kill her, Doreen screamed at Deanna to hide inside the house. What followed is almost too gruesome and heinous to describe. Mike began stabbing and slicing Doreen with the machete, severing her hand and critically injuring her. He then removed her unborn baby using the weapon and threw it onto the living room floor. As he was leaving, he discarded the wolf mask into the yard. When Charles came back home, he was totally overcome by the horror of the situation. Doreen was barely alive, and there was so much blood that he slipped in it as he desperately tried to save her. Though Deanna was physically unharmed, sadly, Doreen would be pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. Because Charles was found covered in blood at the scene and hysterical, investigators naturally turned towards him as the primary suspect. However, when they discovered the wolf mask and bloody footprints leading away from the scene that did not belong to Charles, they began to realize that he was not the culprit. During interviews, police soon learned of Doreen's previous marriage to Mike Dennis and of their contentious divorce. They arrived at Mike's house shortly after midnight, and though the lights were on and his water was running, he was very slow to come to the door. When Mike finally answered, police noticed that he had an injury to his hand that had been covered in gauze. He attempted to explain this away by saying that he had been hurt while playing with a knife. A subsequent search of his house revealed blood, and blood was found in numerous places in his vehicle. He was promptly arrested. Further investigation by police revealed several chilling details. A receipt and a label for an 18-inch machete were found in his home, and a photo was eventually uncovered showing Mike dressed up as the Big Bad Wolf at a previous year's Halloween party. He was wearing the exact mask in the photo that was recovered from the crime scene. Finally, authorities found 2 homemade coffins and 2 anchors in his garage. It would eventually be revealed that Mike originally planned to put Charles and Doreen in the coffins and drown them, just as he believed they had drowned his son. It's unclear why he changed his plan after arriving at the Erberts' home that night. At trial in 1988, Mike Dennis was convicted of the first-degree murder of Doreen Erbert and the second-degree murder of her unborn son. He was subsequently sentenced to death, and as far as we can tell, remains on death row to this day. It is said that he never showed remorse for his heinous crime. On the afternoon of Friday, October 23rd, 1981, 17-year-old Kurt Sova left his home in Newburgh Heights, Ohio. He told his parents, Dorothy and Ken, that he was going to hang out with a friend and that he would be home later that night. As Kurt was close with his parents and generally not the type to get into trouble, they thought nothing of this seemingly ordinary outing. However, little did they know that Kurt's decision to leave the house that day would prove to be a fateful one. After leaving the house, Kurt met up with his friend about a block away. While it's unclear if the friend suggested it first or whether the teenagers always planned to go, they soon headed to a Halloween party that was being thrown at a duplex roughly 2 miles away. While many people would later remember seeing Kurt the night of the party, one thing is clear: he never made it home. By the following morning, Kurt's parents were extremely worried about him, though were hopeful that he would still make his way home soon. Perhaps he had simply lost track of time with friends, or there was some other kind of reasonable explanation. Still, Dorothy and Ken weren't willing to leave anything to chance, and began doing everything that they could think of to try and track their son down. Ken searched the neighborhood and the surrounding area, while Dorothy called Kurt's friends to see if they knew anything, or maybe were with him. No trace of him could be found. When Kurt still hadn't come home on Sunday, Dorothy and Ken filed a missing persons report with police. Dorothy also started printing flyers with Kurt's name, picture, and other information on them, and handing them out in the neighborhood and at local stores. During Dorothy's discussions with countless people that afternoon, she learned about the party that Kurt had attended on Friday night, and that it had been hosted by a woman named Susan. Upon hearing this, Dorothy went to the duplex and asked to speak with her. When Dorothy arrived at the house, a woman who wasn't Susan answered the door. She said that she was just a babysitter, but would have Susan call Dorothy when she returned. That night, Dorothy received a phone call from Susan, who made a bizarre and chilling claim. She said that she hadn't seen Kurt, and that she had never had any Halloween party. However, it didn't take long for Dorothy to realize that Susan wasn't telling the truth. As she continued talking to local residents in Newburgh Heights, one man, a pizza delivery driver, said he remembered doing a delivery to Susan's home that night. He said that there had definitely been a party there. Confused about why Susan had lied to her, Dorothy contacted her again and confronted her with this new information. This time, Susan immediately changed her story, admitting that she had indeed hosted the Halloween party and that Kurt was there. She also said that a majority of the people in attendance that night were from out of town, mostly from Detroit. Almost all of them were also older than Kurt and his friend, and would have been strangers to them. Further interviews with partygoers from that night would only deepen the mystery as to why Kurt was there, and raise questions about his actions. Several people claimed that they had seen Kurt drinking Everclear, an extremely potent grain alcohol that comes in varieties between 60 and 95% alcohol by volume. The spirit is so strong that it is illegal to sell in many parts of the United States, and it seemed like an extremely bizarre thing for Kurt to be drinking. He was definitely not known as a serious drinker, and his lightweight and skinny build meant that the alcohol would have hit him extremely hard. According to the friend that had gone with Kurt to the party that night, this is precisely what happened. At some point, he took an extremely intoxicated Kurt outside for some fresh air, and noticing what state he was in, decided that they should leave. The friend said that he went back inside the house to get their jackets, but when he returned, Kurt was no longer by the chain-link fence where he had left him. It's unclear whether the friend attempted to look for Kurt after this, but perhaps he assumed that Kurt had simply stumbled home. While many now feared that Kurt had drunkenly wandered off somewhere and possibly hurt himself, neither of his parents were buying it. For one thing, the area around the house was meticulously searched and no sign of the teenager had been found. For another, if Kurt had simply disappeared while drunk, an accident, why had Susan been so eager to lie about it? Other strange things soon started to point to the possibility that something more sinister was going on. First, a local record store owner had a bizarre interaction with a suspicious male customer. Upon noticing the missing persons flyer for Kurt in the store, the customer remarked to the store owner that she might as well take it down. He's going to be found dead in 2 days, and nobody's going to know how he died. Around the same time, Susan contacted Dorothy and Kurt again, giving a different account of the events of what happened on the night of her party. This time, she claimed that Kurt had slept on a cot in her basement. Though Kurt's parents had an extremely hard time believing anything Susan said at this point, Ken went over to the house to investigate. He didn't find any signs of Kurt or his belongings, but there was a cot in Susan's basement that looked like it had been slept in recently. Unfortunately, this also produced no real new leads. The biggest break in the case would take place 3 days after Kurt's disappearance on Monday, October 26th, when one of Kurt's classmates would apparently spot him on his way to a job interview. As the teenager was driving by, he claimed that he saw Kurt walking towards a white van with people who didn't look like they were from Newburgh Heights. He also claimed that he heard Kurt call out, "Hey Franco," to one of the unknown members of the group. Unfortunately, because Kurt's classmate didn't realize that he was missing at the time, he didn't immediately report the incident to police. As far as he was concerned, nothing suspicious was going on, and it looked like Kurt knew whoever he was with. Then, on October 28th, Kurt's parents received the news that everyone had been dreading. Their son's lifeless body had been found in a ravine on Harvard Street by some boys who were playing. He was just 500 yards away from where the party had taken place 5 days earlier. Kurt was found wearing a bright yellow t-shirt but did not have his jacket. He was barefoot and only one of his shoes, the left one, could be found. It was wedged in a pile of nearby rocks. The right shoe was completely missing. There were no obvious signs of trauma to Kurt's body, and aside from a few cuts and scrapes, he appeared to have suffered no serious injuries. While it was initially hoped that an autopsy would provide some answers, it only served to deepen the mystery surrounding Kurt's death. For starters, his cause of death could not be determined. There wasn't enough alcohol in his system, and no evidence could be found of a traumatic injury or even an underlying illness. More strangely, the pathologist concluded that Kurt had only been dead for about 24 to 36 hours before he was found. It appeared that he had been alive for most of the time that he had been missing. What's more, Dorothy and Ken were positive that Kurt's body had not been in the ravine for very long. It had been searched just 24 hours prior to the discovery. On the same day that Kurt's body was discovered, The owner of the record store who previously had the uncomfortable encounter with the suspicious customer received a bouquet of flowers with a card. The card read, "Roses are red, violets are blue. They found him dead, and they will find you dead too." Needless to say, the woman was extremely disturbed by the message, especially since it had happened so close to the suspicious encounter. The stranger's ominous words had also proven correct. Kurt had been found dead 2 days after he had spoken to her. The woman contacted the police about the card, and a suspect believed to be behind it was briefly arrested. However, police concluded that he was mentally disturbed and that there was no evidence he was involved in Kurt's disappearance. By the time the body was found, the man had apparently left town. It's unclear if the man who sent the flowers was the same person who had made the ominous statement about Kurt being found 2 days prior. With so much mystery surrounding the case, it was difficult for Dorothy and Ken to know who to trust. They began to believe that they were being lied to, even by the authorities, and that they might actually know how Kurt had died, but were covering it up. They also theorized that Kurt's body had been kept in the basement of Susan's house on the cot, and that this is why she had phoned them. They believed that Susan and whoever was behind the crime had moved the body to its final location, after panicking. For their part, police attempted to track down the mysterious person known as Franco, the name that Kurt had yelled out on the day he was allegedly seen getting into the white van. It was believed that Franco might have been someone that Kurt had recently started hanging out with, and may even have been the person who gave the ominous warning at the record store. However, the unknown man could never be tracked down. In a final chilling twist, just 3 months after Kurt's body was found, another teenager, 13-year-old Eugene Kvet, also vanished from Newburgh Heights. His body was found in a ravine not far from where Kurt's had been found, and disturbingly, his right shoe was also missing. Eugene's cause of death was determined to be from falling into the ravine, though authorities were unable to determine if it was an accident or if he had been thrown or pushed. Just like Kurt's death, Eugene's case was never solved, and many people believe the two cases were related. The boys actually knew each other and were reportedly friendly, adding further speculation. Sadly, in the years since Kurt's unexplained death, all but one of his family members have passed away. His one remaining brother, Kevin, is still searching for answers, as are authorities in Newburgh Heights. Was Kurt's death a murder, an accident, or something in between? Did some sort of cover-up take place? The frustrating truth is that we just don't know. Hopefully, someday, we will finally get the answers to these questions, and the mystery surrounding Kurt's death will be solved once and for all. That brings us to the end of our list. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.